Welcome to Jason's Weird Reads. For this video, I went and asked some of my favorite booktubers to share with us their Lost Gem horror book. I didn't ask all my favorites, and some couldn't do it because of other obligations. But my thanks go out to everyone who was able to share with us a book. It's also important to mention that Alex from the Bookish Report suggested this as a video idea. It took me a little while to get to it, but here it is. Right now. So here are some of my favorite booktubes, like I said, not all, and they're all discussing one book that they feel, it's a horror book that they feel is overlooked, but they love it. And it's part of my Lost Gems series, so I hope that you'll stick around and watch them all, and they're in no particular order, so let's get going.
Hello everyone, my name's Alex and I'm from the channel The Bookish Report. I want to thank Jason to start with for having me on from this video. Even though it was my idea, it's still a pleasure to be invited to take part in the video. Now on my channel I talk mainly about gaslamp horror, gaslamp fantasy. That's horror and fantasy that's combined with historical fiction, the historical period being the Victorian era. However, in this video I'm going to be recommending the 2018 book that's set at the end of the 17th century, and that is The Coffin Path by Catherine Clements. Now this gothic supernatural story is a lost gem because no one's talking about it. There's my review that probably hasn't aged well because it was one of my earlier videos, and here's Harpies in the trees, good girl, Merce, that's what we like to see. Then there's Becca, then nothing, and that is not acceptable. So I'll quickly read you the plot. Maybe you've heard tales about Scarcross Hall, the house on the old coffin path that winds from village to moortop. They say there's something up here, something evil. Mercy Booth isn't afraid. The moors and Scarcross are her home and lifeblood, but beneath her certainty, small things are beginning to trouble her. 3 ancient coins missing from her father's study, the shadowy figure out by the gatepost, an unshakable sense that someone is watching. When a stranger appears seeking work, Mercy reluctantly takes him in. As their stories entwine, this man will change everything. She just can't see it yet. Now in this story we have an awesome feminist female protagonist who's really up against it in this period of time where she's almost about to inherit some property, the old crumbling place where it's set, but inheritance law I don't think is that favourable towards women in this time, but she is not having any of that, and she's a really great character. The horror in this book is twofold because there's threat from human beings and from the supernatural, and it's really gothic as well. It's set on the moors in a crumbling old house in really bad weather, and there's isolation and there's the supernatural and there's mystery, so all those things are blended together really well. This is a great autumn or winter read because from the very beginning, the very first page, it really made me feel cold with the way that they have to live, or had to live in those days where you've got to be out in all weather and all times of day, farming the land and the livestock. And the prose is outstanding, so I'm going to read to you the opening page, which is just this half page here. And if you haven't decided that you want to buy this book yet, then I'm sorry to have wasted your time. 1674, spring. I was born with blood on my hands. I killed my mother on the 22nd of August in the year 1642, the day the first King Charles turned traitor and chose a battlefield over a throne. She was not murdered by musket shot or slaughtered by steel blade, as were so many during those years of war. Hers was a woman's fate. She died in blood, the blood that bore me in on its tide. At least, that's what I was told. I've had blood on my hands ever since. I'm elbow deep in a thick, viscous caul of it, though I've never sweated and screamed in my own childbed. I know life and death better than most women, and now, as ever, I'm mindful of my mother. It happens every time I birth a lamb, the waited pause before the newborn's first breath, like a clock's final turning before the hours strike, and I always think the same thing, how the moment of birth, of new life, so often means the death of something else. Do yourselves a favour.
Hi there, I am Lydia from Typical Books, and thank you, Jason, for inviting me to talk about one of my favorite lost gems, and that is Mr. Be Gone by Clive Barker. And it is a book really split down the middle. It seems to me that quite a few people discovered this as their first Clive Barker, but a lot of people who had read Clive Barker before picked this up and were disappointed, it seems. I find that it is a great gateway to Clive Barker, even though it's nothing like anything he ever wrote. And those who are big fans of Clive Barker waited with bated breath for him to return to horror, so to speak. So when he returned to horror, the response was either huge love, adoration, and joy, like me, or the no, not like that kind of response, or they didn't like the tone. This is written in the first person of a demon from hell, or the book itself, depending on how you want to slice that. And the demon's name is Jacobok Botch. I do just love saying Jacobok Botch. Jacobok Botch is a lesser demon from hell that is wrenched up through a crack in the earth sometime around the 1400s. He is a tortured soul, if any. He's a horrible visage. He's burnt to a crisp. He has two tails, and he is a simpering, submissive little goon, really, honestly. And we get to follow his adventure on planet Earth, so to speak. He wants to be a horrible, powerful demon, quite honestly. So if you are someone who really enjoy Hellboy, but want it to be darker, this is a lot like it. If you enjoyed Patrick Susskind's Perfume, I find that this is written in a very similar tone. It's far darker. I mean, it's Clive Barker. This is a lost gem in that so many people overlook it or take the opinions of others. I say discover it for yourself. It looks like an older book. It is printed on aged looking paper. Starts out with this feel that this book is a living, breathing thing speaking to you and telling you its story. So the publishing of this book, the story of this book, all of it is a complete package. And I think that that is the real allure and why I love this book so much, because it has so much going for it. So yeah, that's my lost gem. Thank you again, Jason, for having me talk about a book I think that everyone should give a chance if they haven't, or maybe reread it if you didn't like it before.
My name is Maris and my channel is Harpies in the Trees. I review horror books that are mainly focused on the supernatural. Thank you so much to Jason for asking me to be a part of this. I really appreciate it. At the moment, I'm on vacation at the Baltic Sea, so this is not my normal setup, so my apologies for that. My lost gem that I want to share with you is a book called The Haunting by Paul Doherty. This book came out in the late 1980s, early 1990s, and I really fell in love with the cover and the synopsis. I really loved the 90s digital graphic artwork on the cover. So I picked it up just on a whim online, and I really do love this book. The story is about a young priest who has a real knack for exorcisms. He just has a real natural ability with it, and he has a reputation for this. So the archdiocese calls him into his office one day and he asks him to take on this project, to go and meet this woman who has a manor house in the country and to see what her problem is, because she's experiencing a lot of supernatural activity. Things like whispering, apparitions, shadows, and even blood pooling on the floor. So not only is she experiencing this, but also the servants of her household are experiencing this. So he goes out to the countryside and he interviews this woman, this lady of the manor, and he interviews her staff. But he also starts digging into the past of the family who's owned the property for centuries. And he also digs into the history of the land surrounding the property. I love this story because it really goes pretty deep. Our young priest really does a lot of research, and it was pretty fascinating because it's about English history, and it's also kind of about not just like the history and the past of the family, but sort of like the relationships and sort of why these relationships would be under tension and strain for this time period. Because this story takes place in the I think it's like the 1850s or the 1890s. But this story goes back as far as the 1600s. So it's pretty rare when there's a haunting that goes back that far. And I think that kind of has to do with how there's not a lot of homes that are that old in the United States, but in England there definitely are. So it's very intriguing to have this older supernatural situation going on. So I liked the characters. I really loved the young priest a lot. He was just very likable, and this book was actually supposed to be a series but that never happened. So this is the one-off. So I really am sad for that, because I really would have loved to tag along with this young priest. He kind of reminded me of maybe like a Sherlock Holmes, but maybe not as like sassy. But he was a great character. So I've never seen anyone else talk about this book. I've never seen it mentioned anywhere. So this is my lost gem.
What's up, everybody? My name is Brad from the channel Brad Proctor, and I wanted to give a huge thank you to Jason for inviting me along today to talk about a book I consider to be a lost gem. The invite is very much appreciated. And today I want to talk about the novella Spun Gunyon by John Bowden. If you've never read John Bowden before, if you've never even heard of John Bowden, you're doing yourself a huge, massive disservice. John has some of the best prose, bar none, that I have read since discovering the world of indie horror. And Spun Gunyon, this will be a great place to start with his work if you've never read anything by John before. So Spun Gunyon, what is this? First of all, that's a really weird word. I believe John made it up, and it has something to do with roadkill. If it is a real word, you can let me know. But Spun Gunyon, we're following our protagonist named Deke. Deke is a truck driver. He returns home one day to discover that his wife, the love of his life, has been murdered, and that sends him into a spiral. It shatters his life, and he just has one thought in mind, and that is revenge. He sets out on this quest, on this odyssey, along what is called the Soul Road, seeking any answers he can find as to who or what might have happened to his wife. John does a great job of weaving together sort of the odd and the grotesque and the haunting onto this one narrative tapestry. It takes place in Pennsylvania, but it feels like an alternate version of Pennsylvania. Like I said, Deke is a truck driver, so we have these dusty back roads of America mixed with these greasy roadside diners you'd see on the side of a highway. But on top of that, he mixes in these elements of dark fantasy as well. These weird fantastical creatures and bits of magic that sort of bleed into reality here and there. It's not a fantasy novel, but it does have those dark fantasy elements sort of bleeding into the real world, the natural world in Pennsylvania. It's a story of love, loss, regret, and revenge. And I really like how Deke sets out with good intentions, just trying to find out what happened to his wife. And along the way, as he's traveling along this soul road, that revenge just sort of taints him, it consumes him, and turns him into maybe the monster that he was seeking out. Maybe he becomes the evil that he was seeking out as to who killed his wife. It's a great story. The prose, as said, is just awesome. It just drips with vivid imagery. I can't speak highly enough of John Bowden's writing. Yeah, that's the lost gem I wanted to talk about today. Spun Gunyon by John Bowden. Definitely check it out, or check out some of John's other work as well. But that's all I have for you guys today. Again, thank you, Jason, so much for inviting me along. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.
Hi everyone, it's Rachel here with the Shades of Orange. Thank you so much to Jason for including me in this collaboration. You are one of my favorite channels, and so I'm so delighted to be part of this. And today I want to talk about a book that in my opinion is super underhyped. I never hear anyone else talk about it, and it's a personal favorite of mine. So the horror book I want to recommend here is The Caretaker of Lornfield by Dave Zeltzerman. And this is a story about a family who every generation is responsible for taking care of this particular field. Every day the men have to go out to the field and weed it, and if they don't, they believe that monsters are going to start growing out of the weeds and take over the world. As you can imagine, this book has a pretty crazy premise, and I just thought it was a lot of fun. What I think works so well with this book is the fact that the story shifts perspectives at very important times. So when things are a little bit ambiguous and you just don't quite know as the reader whether or not these monsters are real or whether or not this is simply a crazy old man. In the story, you have the townspeople that are getting really tired of paying this person to weed this field, and they start to not really believe the historical significance anymore. But we also get the man's perspective, and he is desperate to protect the field, to protect the town, and is so convinced that these monsters are real. And so the story starts out very quiet. It's a very simple story. It's very short, and it definitely packs a punch. So if you want a book that is so well plotted, so well written, and again, a book that no one else is talking about, this is my recommendation for a horror hidden gem. Again, thank you so much, Jason, for including me here. I love your channel, and I'm very happy to be part of it today.
It's Regina St. Clair from Regina's Haunted Library. I want to thank Jason for inviting me to share my favorite lost gem. So this book came out in 1971 and it was a huge hit. So it's kind of surprising that it has gotten lost in the sands of time, and that's The Other by Thomas Tryon. Thomas Tryon also wrote one of my other favorite books, and that's Harvest Home. It's a psychological horror story about two 13-year-old twins in Connecticut in the 1930s. So it takes place in the Depression. It's a very small town. It's a very small community. And the family is grieving because of a death of the father. The mother is in a state of grief. There are a lot of family members kind of around this nest of this farm where they live. And in the center of it are the two twin boys. One is named Holland and one is named Niles. Holland is what you would call the evil twin, while Niles is the good twin. Now, this isn't something that we've never seen explored before, the idea of the other or the dark side or the shadow side, but it's done very well in this book. This was a book that was passed around my family when I was a kid, and we had seen the movie as well, and there's something just very chilling about the story, and I think it's because these characters are so alive and so real. The evil twin Holland does some really horrendous things, including a scene with a pitchfork in a barn. That's all I'm going to say about it. This story relies on a lot of twists and reveals, and it has some very gruesome moments. The movie's also worth checking out. So if you want to read a good book that is not only a good horror story, but also a good work of literature, I highly recommend The Other by Thomas Tryon.
Hi, my name is Juan, and I host the Booktube channel Plagued by Visions. I would like to thank Jason for allowing me a spot in his video in order to gush about a truly underrated, overlooked, yet haunting and unforgettable read. I will thus gratefully take the time allotted to tell you all about this lost gem, Dagon, a 1968 Southern Gothic / Lovecraftian horror novel by Fred Chappell. This work truly lives within the points of convergence between the gritty deviancy and social decay that we see in Southern Gothic tradition and the supernatural madness and haunting bloodlines that often weigh down on Lovecraftian mythos. Perhaps what I find most masterful about this novel is its deceptive simplicity. It is the story of a man who is simply losing control, losing his grasp on his sanity, and turning murderous. However, by proxy, it is the story of an entire lineage, an entire culture, and an entire social identity that is losing control, with all those morbid questions about race, class, and religion that Southern Gothic always allows to fester in its pages. Although it draws directly from Lovecraft's mythos and is named, as you can see, after the famous story of those creepy fish people, Chappell chooses to focus not on the perturbing, unanswered questions of cosmic terror that Lovecraft vexes us with, but rather on the implications that such questions have on the fragile and deteriorating human mind, and the integrity of one's social upkeep, as our main character is a priest, and of course that is extremely at odds with what ultimately happens to his sanity. The prose is admittedly challenging, it's very florid and dense, at times confusing, but for those who love their horror on the more understated and literary side, whatever that means, and who don't mind being driven crazy by mystery over being shocked by revelations, I definitely think Dagon is an underrated, masterful work of terror that truly deserves more recognition.
Hey guys, Nichi, DarkBetweenPages here. First, before I talk about this lost gem that I'm holding in my hands as we speak, I want to say a huge thank you to Jason from Jason's Weird Reads for including me in this video. It means so much to me. Jason, you absolutely rock. You are an incredible addition to this community, and we don't know where we would be without you. So thank you for asking me. Now, it was really hard to whittle this down to just one. As bookworms know, we consume and devour so many books year to year, and each year we find brand new all-time favorites or favorites of the year. But I did it, and you guys would be so proud of me. I did it. I picked just one. And today I'm talking about Cannibal Nuns from Outer Space by Duncan P. Bradshaw. Now, I am so lucky to have one of the hardcover special editions. There are like movie film posters in here that were created. There's extra goodies added at the beginning and the end. And the whole book reads out kind of like a beginning to a movie. It's got a play button in here and everything. This book is not going to be for everyone. You are talking about a priest who is hunting down cannibal nuns from outer space. This is an incredibly insane, bizarre concept. It is raw, it is unique. But not only is the concept incredible and the story incredible, the characters are just fan-freaking-tastic. Cannibal Nuns from Outer Space gets dark, it gets gory, it gets really vulgar at times, but it is also so extremely hilarious. I cannot recommend this one enough. Again, I can't stress enough, this story is so unique. It is absolutely out of this world, bizarre, it is vulgar, it is gory, it is full of blood. The humor in this, the characters, there's certain characters in here that I will never forget to the day I die. They will stick with me, and I love Duncan's writing. I love Duncan as a person. He's an incredible author. He's an incredible human being. If you think you're into these types of weird reads, you think you can handle this, you have a really good sense of humor, odd, absurd, weird reads, those things that you just won't see day to day, I highly recommend Cannibal Nuns from Outer Space by Duncan P. Bradshaw. And when you've read it, make sure to let me know what you thought of it, because I would love to know. That is my pick for Lost Gems. Thank you again so much, Jason, for including me in this, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.
Hi guys, I'm Kasha from Kasha's book Sematary, and Jason was so nice to invite me to his channel to present you with a book that I feel doesn't get enough love. So there is a novella that I absolutely have loved and enjoy. It is a debut novella, and it only has around 100 ratings in Goodreads, which is not much. And whenever I recommend books, I try to look for horror books or novellas that have different aspects, like horror subgenres, so that it might appeal for more than one different reader. And that novella is The Festering Ones by S.H. Cooper. And I really love this one because we have a strong female character that is leading our story. She is fearless and she is determined. So when Faith was a little girl, she saw how her father was dragged away by a creature that looked like a woman with spider legs, and her father was never seen again. 20 years later, she's still traumatized by those events, but she's going to be forced to return to her hometown after her mother passes away. She decides to face her demons now that she's back in her hometown, and she starts to investigate her father's disappearance. However, this is going to lead her to a weird, dark cult. This little novella had packed everything that I love, which is a story about a cult, an investigation, a creature feature. We have disappearances, we have some slasher elements added to the story. So it doesn't matter what type of horror you love, I'm pretty sure there's going to be something in this novella that you're just going to really enjoy. It was great paced, and it was just surprising as you were turning the pages. The story kept changing into something different, and I was so invested. I was just hoping that this book would be 500 pages because I couldn't stop reading. So if you guys have not checked this novella out yet, I strongly recommend you to give it a try.
Hey, Jason's Weird Reads channel. My name is Josh, and I'm Working Man Reads. Now, Jason reached out and said, hey, what's a hidden gem in the horror genre that you think needs a little bit more love? Well, I had an endless list, and I hemmed and hawed on which one to pick. So I decided to just go with a well-rounded out short story collection that had a little bit of everything for everyone. Now, I chose Buried with the Night by Sayan Das. Now, this is the anniversary edition, and it is actually featuring, I don't know if it'll come through because my camera is so good, but it's got or my light is so bright, but it has Workhorse in it. Now, Workhorse is a not safe for work short piece of fiction, and that's actually an extreme horror story, splatterpunk actually, probably. And And then the first story in the collection, which has kind of grown with me over time, and I actually have to I think I might reread it today. It's Curtis. And now Curtis is kind of a story about a psychologist who is talking to a serial killer. He's not sure, what's going to happen going forward, but he starts to become very infatuated with this character. And I don't want to spoil anything for you, but it gets intense. And it's one of those thrilling, suspenseful reads. There's also one that takes place on Halloween night. And I know I'm early, but it's never too early to pick up a book for Halloween, to me, personally. The final story is called Darjeeling, and personally I thought it was Sion's best writing in this book. So check out Buried with the Night by Sion Das. And Jason, thank you so much for having me. This was awesome. Good luck, guys.
Hey guys, this is John at Books of Blood. So today for Jason's Lost Gems series, I want to talk about The Influence by Ramsey Campbell. This was published in 1988. I actually don't know how I lucked up on it, but I actually got a signed copy of it when I ordered it. Anyway, this is about the matriarch of a family, Queenie. Queenie passes away. Her estate is willed to her niece Allison, and Allison has a 7-year-old daughter, Rowan, and she's also got a sister, Hermione, and Hermione is found dead at Queenie's graveside. Alright, so Hermione believes that not all of Queenie is dead. So that's a little bit of the catalyst for the plot right there. And then Allison's daughter, she's 7 years old. Her name is Rowan. She starts to go through these changes. And, it kind of, concerns Allison. She's wondering why is she going through these changes? What are the reasons? And, of course, she begins to wonder if perhaps maybe Queenie isn't possessing the child, or doesn't have, like the book says, the title says, have some kind of influence over Rowan. And, and of course that's kind of the, kind of a worst nightmare that a parent can have is that. And I told Jason I'm terrible at describing the plots of books, and I hope I did this one justice. But I love this one because it's a neat little kind of ghost story, a possession story, all kind of rolled into one. And I love Campbell's writing because it is so subtle sometimes. His horror is so subtle that you'll be reading it, and when some authors might describe something that is just absolutely horrific, they go so over the top with it, you're just like, wow, you feel like you got hit by a freight train. But Campbell, there's a scene in this where a guy gets hit by a train. And I had to reread it about 2 or 3 times before I realized, oh, wow, because it is just so subtly written that it just gets under your skin. It just gets right into your psyche or something like that, So that's a lot of the reason why I love this book, is like I said, because of Campbell's quiet and subtle way of writing his horror. And I'm going to ramble. I'm rambling now. So you know what? I'm going to just shut up and just tell you that's why I chose this book. All right. And Jason, if you got to edit any of this, feel free to do so. All right. So yeah, there you go. Thank you. Influence by Ramsey Campbell.
A horror novel that always gets overlooked, in my opinion, is a book called Exquisite Corpse by Poppy Z. Bright. This was published back in 1996, and it follows the story of a British serial killer who manages to escape from prison in a very clever way. And then he runs away to America, where he accidentally meets an American serial killer in a bar, and the two of them become friends and start going out on these killing sprees. We're then greeted to these kind of vivid, horrible descriptions of their murders, and also their kind of internal thought processes. This book is especially scary for me because these two characters are actually based on real life people, real life serial killers. The British one is based on a man called Dennis Nilsen, who was a serial killer in England. and the American one is based on a man called Jeffrey Dahmer, who's probably a bit more well known. That's what makes the book terrifying for me. They're actually real people, and as well as that, the book is beautifully written. The prose is really, really detailed and really intelligent. You kind of really get an insight into what these killers are thinking about. You really get a sense of what they believe in and what they think. And it's a highly underrated book in my opinion, and I really recommend you check it out. However, do be careful with it, because it's probably the most shocking book I've ever read. Don't say I didn't warn you.